Most days I can barely leave my bed, 'cause someone lives rent-free inside my head. I say I'm not okay.
Hello folks. If I move and you hear that noise, my chair is very creaky and it's actually kind of worrying me. I don't feel safe in it. I really need to get a little reading chair for this room. Anyway, I am here to do my wrap up for March. I feel like there was a lot of myths and legends and godly aspects to this, so it was a very exciting month generally for what I was reading. There's also quite a bit of horror involved as well, or horror elements shall we say. So yeah, I was really loving the majority of what I was reading this month. Horror things I don't think I finished, so that's sad, but I also have the opportunity to talk about it next month when I provisionally do finish it. So the first book was one that I was on the Hellbound Books Publishing book tour for. That is a mouthful. They sent me over a digital copy of this to help participate within the book tour. So thank you to Hellbound Books Publishing. And this is the Horrorzine's book of monster stories by a plethora of authors. I almost feel like I've already talked about this, but I think it's because the month before I had read another short collection of horror stories, but that one was by Darklit Press. So I think because I've read them so close together, sometimes I think I've already talked about it, but I haven't. So this one I ended up giving a 5 out of 5 stars. It's basically an anthology of all things monstrous, with veterans within the indie horror world, as well as some of the best emerging new horror writers writing today. So as I say, this was a digital e-arc. There was a lot of hits in this one for me. This collection had so many favorites like within the story, and that's saying something because it was quite a beefy collection. I want to say it was like around 300-400 pages, and there was maybe like 20 plus short stories in there. So to have pretty much all of them be a story that I would recommend is very powerful, I think, for the quantity of works that we had in there. Obviously some did fall a little bit flat, some are more forgettable than others, but overall it was such a strong collection, and there are some authors in there that I will definitely be keeping an eye out for. I have written down a more detailed review where I talk about the stories like in depth, I believe, even if it's just a couple of sentences, just a few thoughts. So I think I might like briefly go over that in a separate video and do like a full dedicated review to this book. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Next up, I DNF'd a book at the beginning of the month, and this was Death on the Louisiana by R.L. Graham. I believe it was started by someone that passed away, and then someone continued on with this book for them. So this is kind of like a Agatha Christie mystery inspired sort of story, and it's set in 1915's New York on the RMS Louisiana. Transatlantic liner full of luxury departs for war-torn Europe. When a fellow passenger is found dead, civil servant Gallagher is asked to investigate the suspicious circumstances, whilst of course everyone is trapped aboard with a killer on the loose. Unfortunately, I had a major disconnect that had crept up pretty early within the story. I don't read a lot of historical fiction or like murder mystery, so I was hoping maybe it was just me just getting time to really kind of sink my teeth in it, but unfortunately it's a feeling that carried throughout of the 250 pages that I read or listened to, because I did listen to the audiobook. So I got to about halfway, or maybe a little over halfway of the book, and I couldn't continue anymore, unfortunately. Honestly, I wasn't as committed enough to just trek through to find the source of where this disconnect started and try and rewind and listen back through there, because there were some things that I weren't understanding, and they had just slipped when my concentration had slipped, I suppose, and I just wasn't committed enough to really go back and re-listen to all that and figure out where it all went wrong for me, really. After that, I listened to another audiobook. This one is Everybody Looking by Candice Io, or Edo. I'm so sorry for pronouncing that incorrectly. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it is a coming-of-age kind of slice-of-life story. This one is described as a heavily autobiographical debut novel in verse, telling the story of Ada, daughter of an immigrant dad and an African-American mum, and her struggle to carve a place for herself in the world for her black female body in a world of conflicting messages, which I feel like is a relevant feeling for so many people. This was such a beautifully written story. The slice of life style was so like just easy listening. I just fully felt like I was absorbing everything that was happening. It's just flowing through me. Despite the hardships that Ada went through, she did have a lot to tackle in her like family life, her personal life, school life, all that sort of things at that awkward age of like growing up and being at school and just kind of learning who you are and your own identity, whilst you've got all the strong contenders of identity around you, whether that be family or friends, and you're just trying to find your own place. So despite all the hardships of that, it just felt such a like delight, almost like a breath of fresh air to listen to. Ultimately, this was a story of distancing oneself from emotional abuse, really, whether that is cutting ties of family members or, you know, removing toxic friends or environment. And of course, just finally finding self-love, which was incredibly inspiring, very powerful in terms of its takeaway message. And yeah, I just thought it was beautifully done. To that, I finished up a book. This was sent to me by Black Crow PR. I don't think my dates worked for when they were doing the book tour, but I still posted. Just because they sent it to me, I felt like, let me reciprocate that and post my thoughts now as I was reading it on the date that I would have done it if it fell within their book tour week, you know? So I just talked a little bit about how I was finding the book so far, what it's about, that sort of thing. I think I was maybe around halfway through when that happened. So obviously I've since finished and I have more complete thoughts, which I've actually done a full video for, and it's already on the channel. If you do want to watch that, I will link that in the cards. But yes, this is To Cage a God by Elizabeth May, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. And also it has a bit of spice in it. I don't read an awful lot of spice, but I'm realizing that I'm quite enjoying it. And for me personally, for someone that doesn't read an awful lot but gets quite happy when it's in like a fantasy and I'm enjoying it, I gave this a 4 like spicy pepper rating out of 5. So a little bit about this. We are following Galena and Sarah, who have grown to become living weapons raised to overthrow an empire. With their mother gone and the country on the brink of war, it falls to the sisters to stoke the fires of rebellion and end the cruel reign of a royal family possessed by destructive gods. As I say, I have a full review video on this one, so if you would like to check that out, you are more than welcome to. Next up, I continued on with the Echoes of the Fall series by Adrian Chbosky, and I continued on with book 2, which is The Bear and the Serpent. This one I listened to on audiobook and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. So I'm gonna try and give you like a brief synopsis, but not enough that it spoils anything that happened within book 1 in terms of plots and major developments and character growth and things like that. So as the South is in turmoil, an old terror emerges in the North. Civil war threatens as Tukuman and his twin sister battle for the throne only one can have. She has been named champion of our people, but they're unsure if she is an asset or a threat. I found this to be such a great follow-up from book 1. We have this main plot, and if you don't want to hear anything about this, then definitely like skip ahead until you see, I don't know, like a minute or so. I'm going to be holding up a physical book for the next one, so skip ahead until that if you prefer. But for those of you that want to stick around for some thoughts, again, trying to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but some things I do want to talk about. So I felt like one of the main themes where they were sort of coming together to battle this bigger opponent, where they had this concept of the plague people, and I thought it was so cool, like them being soulless humans that are unable to step into animal forms, wanting to sort of thwart art and religion, culture and the magic of the world that we've been following and, you know, I've been enjoying from book 1 and book 2. I thought it was such a thought-provoking direction. I feel like you can almost put that as a metaphor for so many, like, I don't know, so many like colonizers really coming into the land and just taking over, removing anything and kind of seeing it almost as like heathen and like pagan, but in such a discriminative way, and such a like using those words as if they're, I don't know, less than, you know what I mean? Like, I thought that was such a, again, I say, a thought-provoking direction for the story to take. The sequel didn't fail to deliver the rich characters and the lifestyles that book 1 certainly explored and went into detail to. But this one, it just took it so much further, as well as, you know, definitely progressing the overall storyline. So I thought it was phenomenal. Following that up, I finished a book that, again, I feel like I've been reading for a long while, since before I moved home, actually. So yeah, I had put it down, and then some priority reads came up and yada yada yada. Anyway, I got the audiobook on library loan, so I did some blended reading in the end to polish this one off, and it is Stephen Fry's Great Mythology #3, Troy, again by Stephen Fry. So this is The Siege of Troy Retold, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So of course, this is a retelling of the legend of Troy, a tale of love and war, passion and power. You'll find heroism, hatred, desire and despair, and of course a lot of godly meddling within mortal lives. This was, again, such a great account. There was so much that I hadn't even begun to understand before. And although I am such a nerd for like Greek mythology, you know, legends, tales, folklore, I just feel like I hadn't really been necessarily schooled or taught myself much about the Trojan siege and everything that went down there. I kind of knew the basics, the kind of main stakes that were at play, but I didn't know it to the severity and the depth that Stephen Fry kind of unearthed for me within this. I also just found it just to be so ever fascinating how much the gods on Olympus were so entwined within the everyday mortal lives. Like, I had these like first-hand encounters with them, as you know, the stories go. So it's so interesting to see where fact and fiction kind of meet and blur and marry together, like so much so that you don't know what actually happened in terms of ancient history and what was more kind of cautionary tale, you know. Stephen Fry talks a little bit about that as well, but I thought it was fascinating and I thoroughly enjoyed this. Following up, similar name, similar title, A Prince of Troy by Lindsay Clark, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. This is a historical ancient Greek retelling from the series The Troy Quartet. My mouth just couldn't like maneuver those words for some reason, and this is book 1 in that series. This again was an audiobook, so I read a lot on audio this month, which to me I enjoyed. I love just tuning out, doing stuff around the house, working and just having my earphones in and doing what I need to do. So, of course, a breakdown, again, similar story to what we've just been speaking about, but when Paris settles a beauty contest between Aphrodite, Hera, and Athena, he is promised the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. But Helen is already married to the powerful Menelaus of Sparta. Of course, war ensues. I was worried picking this one up that it maybe would be a bad idea to jump straight into another book talking about Troy so detailed, and you know, another retelling, another author kind of taking their piece from it and crafting it into a new way to be absorbed. But luckily for me, that wasn't a problem. I didn't feel like I was comparing so much. I mean, sometimes when you read things that are similar, naturally your mind just goes to comparison anyway. Like, you didn't find that to be like an overdone thing within me during my reading experience, and it didn't feel any negativity from doing that if that happened. I definitely enjoyed hearing more about Paris's life within this take of it, but it certainly made me dislike him even more. Learning about Helen as well was new for me, but she still remains to be quite elusive. I just feel like there's not an awful lot about her actual heritage, because again, that's where the myth and the history actually blend, because apparently she was crafted from a swan egg as 2 sets of twins, and I don't know, one was born from the womb and another set of twins was born from the swan egg. And yeah, in this one, Helen as a character makes the comment of, yeah, if you believe that, they'd have you believing that I was birthed from a swan egg. So it's almost like prodded at. So it's like, again, that blurred line of what is fact, what's fiction, you know. It was just interesting. Book, this one is Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. This is a 5 out of 5 stars read for me. Classic children's autobiography of animals, and told by himself, Black Beauty, of course. We are following the life of this beautiful horse from colthood onwards, living through cruel ownership and passing from hand to hand. There was so much emotion in this. It was absolutely packed, full of heartache and adventure, and just so much was going on. I remember picking this up when I was a child, years and years ago. I think my grandparents there was a Sun campaign, you know, the newspaper The Sun. They were running like these vouchers and you could collect them each week and cash it in for their editions of these classic books they were bringing out, or like reprinting. I can't remember the publishing house that they used. And yeah, I had like literally a black bin bag of these books after like a month or whatever, a couple of months. Must have been a couple of months they were running, or maybe you could get a couple at a time, I don't know. I had quite a few. And I can't for the life of me remember what happened to that. I mean, I remember it being in a black bin bag. So maybe like when I was little, my mum would tidy out my bunk bed. I had like a play bit underneath, so it was a bed and then a play stuff and a little cupboard where you'd shut everything away. I feel like she might have tidied it away and then accidentally threw it. I don't know, because she wouldn't typically have thrown my books. Do you know what I mean? Like my books were like, you know, we love books in the household. We'd never just throw them like that. But I feel like that must have been the only thing to have happened to them. So I never finished it. All that to say, I'm happy that I loved it so much and went back to it in my adult years and really adored it. I think I would have absolutely sobbed though if I'd have finished it, because getting to a character called Ginger, her story, which is Black Beauty's friend, it was just so heartbreaking and harrowing. She'd been through so much abuse because she never got like the gentle like breaking in her youth, and so it made her frightened, it made her aggravated. She didn't want to have the bit in her mouth, she didn't want to be pulled so roughly, understandably. And it was just, oh, I think I would have actually sobbed. I didn't sob this time reading it, you know, properly all the way through, but I was getting there. I was emotional, you know. Despite all of this story was so beautiful. It was such a fantastic classic, and I just loved how it was done, like an autobiography of a horse. That's just phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. Next up, another audiobook. Are we surprised? Heck no. This is Magic Lessons by Alice Hoffman, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This is the prequel that traces a centuries-old curse to its source, unveiling the story of Maria Owens, accused of witchcraft in Salem, and how her story created this legacy for the Owens family members. Super enchanted and just as wonderfully written as Practical Magic. There's a few different ways I think you can read this series. So there's like 4 books in total. 2 are kind of like classed as prequels, including this one, and then there's 2 like main storyline books, right? So I read Practical Magic, which is like the first, but there's more history if you go back to this one, Magic Lessons, which is like a prequel. There's another prequel, then there's Practical Magic, and then there's another book that I can't remember the name of. So yeah, you can read it in a different variety of ways, but I really wanted to kind of go back and see more about this Maria character and what caused her to create the curse of no Owens woman can find love, and if they do, like dangerous, horrible things will happen to the recipient, right? So yeah, I just enjoyed reading it that way. I think it was right for me. I appreciated it, and I just got a little bit more out of the story, well, a lot more out of the story, I think, had I have just carried on to the second next main book. I feel like, again, only reading 2 books so far by Hoffman, but the way she writes generational stories about a strong matriarch family is just so exquisite, and she just nails it on the head. Like, it's absolutely beautiful. I loved going back into the source. I think, of course, my favourite thing about this story is that we've gone back to the source of the curse, how it all began, the story there. And really, when you think about it, Maria Owens wasn't really the first Owens, which there's just so much more. It's just such a complex family dynamic, and I thought it was phenomenally done. So yeah, absolutely loved it. Following up, I finished another book which I was again kindly invited onto the book tour for. This is another of Black Crow PR's book tours, and thank you again to them for sending me a copy. Mine got so beat up. First of all, it was already like a bit janky from when it delivered. Like the Royal Mail was really roughing up my stuff for some reason. But because I've just been putting it straight in my bag, and usually I have like a sleeve or something, and I don't know, I just haven't been using it, and it's a paper copy, I've just roughed it up, and I feel so bad because it's such a beautiful cover. And I'm so sad because the other day I was like proper like rearranging my bag, but I wasn't looking properly, I wasn't taking things out, I was just like smishing this in, realised I was smushing it into my banana that was at the bottom of my bag that I had forgot I'd put in there. So I had to like scrub it all off, clean out my bag. That's why it's all like ripped. I'm a mess at this stage. Anyway, this is Song of the Huntress by Lucy Holland. I have done another book tour where I spoke about my thoughts so far. Again, I was probably around halfway through when I was reading this. So yeah, have since finished it. I've got full thoughts now. I actually want to do a full video on this one because I have a lot of thoughts. There's a lot of conversations in this that I about relationships that I really want to go into more depth about. But anyway, I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Set in Britain 60 AD, Herla makes a desperate pact with the Otherworld king to save her land from the Romans. She becomes Lord of the Hunt for centuries until she meets a Saxon queen on a bloody battlefield. Was so sapphic, so queer, and I absolutely loved that. But there was so much more depth to it, like within the relationship dynamic, that was just, oh my god, it was so messy. That's why I really want to talk more into depth about this in a separate video, because I cannot go into it here. It was just, they all felt so raw, so real, not always very likable, but yeah, I have so much to talk about. So I will save that for a separate video. And lastly, I feel kind of bad that we are landing on what became a very mediocre book to finalise this video, so I do apologise for that. But this is The Girl of Hawthorne and Glass by Aidan Geray Paul, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. This I listened to via BookBeat on audiobook, and this is kind of like queer YA fantasy. The series is Metamorphosis, and this is book number 1. So far there's only 2 books within the series. I'm not sure if there's any plans for more to come out, because since reading this I've looked into the ratings and it has like 2 point something, like it's not got a lot of high ratings at all, so maybe I should have checked that out first. Anyway, Eli is a made thing that the witches created to hunt down ghosts in the human world. Terrified that her mistakes recently will earn her unmaking, she seeks help from a group of human and witch renegades in the human world. Disappointingly mediocre for me. It just had everything that I thought I would love. It just lacked any real oomph and depth to it, and the pacing was kind of all over the place. I really loved the queer identity and the drive behind this designed rebellion that they were kind of crafting and bringing together, but it felt like the story just really struggled to properly get its feet off of the ground, and it just had too much packed into it that didn't expand in a correctly pacey way. Like, it was just off. The whole thing was off balance with each other, which was so unfortunate, because as I say, it had a lot of themes, you know, buzzwords, things like that, things that I look for in books, in fantasy in specific, and it just fell flat, unfortunately. There's nothing awful about it. It was just an okay book, unfortunately. So that is me for this video. Do let me know what you read during March. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye.